Good evening, everybody. This is Luke here with you. I am here with a congressional candidate for this District 11 in Texas, Ross Schumann. How are you doing tonight, Ross?
Doing well, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing well. So, dear listener, you might be wondering how we got hooked up on this. So, a buddy of mine, he was actually one of my underclassmen in the Corps Cadets at A&M. I saw him share something on Facebook about a gentleman named Ross Schumann running for Congress, and I said, well, heck, that might be his brother. And so I reached out to my friend Kyle, and he put us in contact, and I went to Ross's website and really liked what I saw coming from a very staunch capitalist perspective, freedom-oriented, liberty, individual rights, property rights-oriented mindset. And I really liked what I saw, and I thought there would be an interesting opportunity to maybe have some discussion, a little bit of back and forth, and hopefully help Ross get his name out there. And that's what we're here to do today. So if you want to, we can just jump right into it. Ross, what do you say?
That sounds great, man. So yeah, like you said, my brother Kyle, who went to the Texas A&M. So I didn't go to A&M. I do have a master's degree, an MBA from Syracuse University. Specializing in microfinance and economics. I grew up on a 800-acre ranch and, in a small town. I know what it's like to work hard and put your time in and put your effort in and really want to be the best you can be and, have those opportunities. And at the same time, I want to make sure that we're keeping this country where it was, where people who work hard and put their best foot forward and put their best effort forward are being the people who are going to be rewarded for that work and are going to be able to do so. And they're not going to have government control or government interference in their lives. And they're going to be able to live their lives the way they want to live it and be free and happy in doing so.
Right on, man. Really, before we get started, let me ask you, where can people find you on social media?
So you can find us on Facebook. It's Schumann for Congress, Ross Schumann for U.S. Congress. You can find us on Twitter at Ross Schumann. That's at ROSSSCHUMANN. You can also visit our website. It's SchumannTX11.com. That's SchumannTX11.com. Take a look there. We have a blog post there, and take a look. And like Luke said, take a look at it, see what you like. If you read and you like what you read, then definitely take a time to find out a little more about us.
All right, right on. Texas is at an interesting crossroads right now. Ross, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah. Sorry, you broke out there for a second. Yeah, Texas it's at an interesting crossroads. It's in the one sense, Texas is a very exciting place. In another sense, it's a little bit concerning. People talk about it turning more and more, purple. I wouldn't by any stretch at this point call it blue, but people get concerned about it going purple. And I see the Ocasio-Cortezes of the world, the Squad, this come up of a younger generation, in my opinion, a much more principled and now they're very terrible principles and destructive principles, but they're principled nonetheless. And we see this come up on the left of a younger, more principled group. And the sort of center left, the Nancy Pelosi's, the Joe Bidens, they're having a really difficult time dealing with these more principled leftists. And I when I think about that in the context of Texas, I see the Dan Crenshaws, the Matt Gaetz, the Devin Nunes's, and I also see sort of a similar trend happening on the right with people with really good ideas coming up on the right, having their own come up. And that's very, very exciting, especially Dan Crenshaw being located in Texas. So I want to ask, what was the genesis of your deciding to run for Congress in District 11? And as a separate but follow-up question, why are you running? So it's a two-part question. What was the genesis of it? And then why are you running?
So the genesis of it comes back from as a kid. I remember watching the Clinton impeachment probes and the Clinton impeachment trials on TV and listening to my dad just, yell at the television as he watched the news. And it always struck me that well, Dad, if you're this upset about it, why aren't you trying to do something? Why aren't you actually trying to get out there and make a difference? If you think you have good ideas, if you think you can help people, then that's what you should be trying to do. And so that always stuck with me, and I always thought about it myself, like, okay, if I ever get that opportunity, I'm going to take it. And the second part of that is I'm running because I see, like you said, there's a dearth of a youth movement on the Republican side. We're seeing a lot of young people gravitate towards the left because they simply don't know about anywhere else to go. All their friends are going there. Everybody in their generation's going to the left, and they think that's where they ought to end up. And they don't see any voices on the right side that they think are similar to them. We're starting to see it with Ben Shapiro, with Candace Owens, and with some of these other groups that are coming out, some of these other characters that are coming out and starting to let us know that, hey, youth can be conservative. We can be conservative. We can be principled. We can want to be financially stable and other things like this and not want the government to do everything for us and want to have freedoms. But there does need to be that movement in Congress being reflected as well. It can't just be voices on the air. It can't just be people on television. It has to be representation in Congress as well to actually show these people that freedom is there and the opportunities are there, and you can be conservative. You can be like-minded, and you can want to be financially responsible and have a country that's not so far into debt and want people who work hard to be rewarded for their hard work. And that's not a shameful thing to be. And I want to make sure that our people, our young and our everybody are getting this message that it's okay to be a conservative. It's okay to love your country, and it's okay to want your country to be great and to continue to strive to make your country better and better and better, as well as wanting to have personal liberties and personal identity and not have a government that tells you what you can and cannot say and can and cannot do. And it's very important that this youth movement in the nation today starts seeing people that are in their age group and their brackets that facilitate those messages.
I want to push back on that a little bit. I get where you're coming from, and I agree to some extent, but I would say that that's not far enough. I don't think it's enough to say that being a conservative is not necessarily bad. I think that what the message is, and I'm curious to know your opinion on this, I think the message ought to be that one ought to be a conservative. You should be a conservative. It's not merely okay. That's the moral idea, the moral ideal, I should say. Mm-hmm. That it's not that we're not bad. We're not the absence of a negative. We are the presence of a positive.
Are the positive.
You should be a conservative. You should be on the right. You should be for individual rights. You should be for property rights. You should be for capitalism, because that's good for you. It's good for everybody. We know that historically. We know that philosophically. We know that it's in the Constitution. The founding fathers, when they formed the United States, they had studied their history. They looked at the rise and fall of other nation states, and the United States exists in the way that it does for reasons, and those reasons are that freedom is the moral. Freedom, liberty, individual rights, capitalism. That is moral. That is right, and it's not merely okay, but you should be in favor of that. What do you think about that?
I think you're right. It's important that these people understand that liberty, give me liberty or give me death. Those words are words to live by. That it's not enough for security. Security in the absence of liberty is tyranny. So we need to make sure that these people, and when I say I want them to see it's okay, it's not that I want them just to think, oh, it's okay to have a few conservative ideals, but I want them to know that being conservative and being outright conservative and living conservative values and voting conservative values and putting conservative values out into the area and espousing them is not something to be ashamed of, but it's something to be proud of. It's something that we can go out and say, we are the conservatives. We want individual liberty. We want individual rights. We want to maintain freedoms for everybody and ensure that everybody is being treated equally and fairly in this country. I think what we see from the left, and we're starting to see this more and more, and it's their only tactic they really have at this point, is to shout down conservatives and call us racist and call us bigots and other things because we don't support the group of the moment. The left always has the group of the moment, whichever, whether it be LGBTQ, whether it be transgender, whether it be a minority of some form, that group at that moment is put above everybody else. And I have, no hard feelings towards anybody, and I want everybody to be treated equally and fairly. But that doesn't mean that somebody gets to be treated above somebody else. That doesn't mean that somebody gets preferential treatment at some point in time. And it's not a cycle of who gets to be in power and who doesn't. Equality is equality. That means everybody all together at once at the same time being treated exactly the same as everybody else, being allowed to live their lives in the way they see being the best fit for themselves, so that they can continue to thrive and make decisions for themselves.
Now, we've seen.
Go ahead.
I just really quickly before you move on, because I want to let you finish, but I think this is important to point out. I assume when you say that you mean equality before the law.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Sorry, no worries. I assume that when you say that, you mean equality before the law. Specifically, that's what you're referring to, right? Because if you're talking about more of an egalitarian approach, everyone has to be equal. I mean, this is what communism is. This is what socialism is, which is more of a metaphysical equality. It's not equality before the law. We're not talking about legal equality. We're talking about metaphysical equality, that everybody should be made equal in spite of the fact that nobody is equal. Everybody is an individual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
so you're completely correct. It is about legality sense. So, when we get treated, but what I'm saying is that, we need to have equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. What we see in communism and socialism is equality of outcome. Everybody gets treated the same. Everybody's end process is the same. But what I want to make sure is that everybody's getting the same opportunities, is getting the same access to the opportunities. You may not get the opportunity based on, your work ethic or something else, or your perseverance or your personal choices, and that's fine. But are you being proactively kept from having these opportunities by the government? If that's the case, then we need to correct that. But as long as you are being allowed to live your life in the way you see fit, as the Constitution gives you the rights to do, then I want you to be able to thrive in the way you see fit. As long as you are not harming somebody else, not taking somebody else's rights away, then live your life the way you see fit. Live your life the way you want to live it, and put yourself in a position that you feel will make yourself succeed. We cannot get. Go ahead.
Sorry, finish your thought, but I want to come back to that as well.
So what I'm saying is we can't guarantee outcomes, right? And we can't make sure that a certain group is getting preferential treatment over another. We can't make sure that today it's this minority group or tomorrow it's this group, and that they're getting opportunities, they're getting chances that other people are not getting, and they're being given favorable treatment. What we have to do is we have to make sure that everybody, regardless of where they come from or their ethnocentric background, is being given the equal opportunities, equal chances to thrive, to be able to have these opportunities if they want to, if they take them. And, that's not guaranteeing that any one group is going to put themselves out there. So what we see, especially in engineering, we see, well, there's not enough women in engineering. Well, are we looking at the fact that some women aren't going into engineering? Is that more of the reason? It's not that women are trying to get into engineering and aren't getting into engineering, or are not being allowed into engineering. It's just that they're choosing not to go into engineering. So we could rewrite the rules for all the men to make it easier for the women, but that's not the answer here. The simple answer is that women choose not to go into engineering as much as men go into engineering. We see that women choose to go into nursing a lot more than men choose to go into nursing. And it's not bad or good or it's exactly as it should be. That people are allowed to make choices for themselves and are allowed to put themselves in a situation they feel is best suited for them, and be able to thrive based on their own wants and their own desires.
So what would you say to let's imagine a leftist comes to you and says, I totally agree with equality of opportunity as well. That's why I stand for abolishing all private schools and all charter schools for public education. Because private schools and charter schools represent a delta in opportunity, because not everybody can afford private schools. And in some states, tax money goes to charter schools and private schools. And one could argue, and I know for a fact that this is a big debate in many states, is that charter schools are immoral because it takes money away from the public schools, which lessens equality of opportunity. So what would you say to somebody who comes to you and says, well, Ross, I agree with you, and that's why I stand for abolishing charter schools and private schools? What would be your response?
So my response is to go the exact opposite way of that, is to say, no, we need to open up more free school choice. We need to make sure that every adult, every parent is allowed to choose where their kids go to school, that they're not forced to send their kid to a school that's failing. We need to be looking at why these schools are failing. And a lot of times we can tie that back to the unionization of teachers, that we see that the schools don't have the impetus to succeed. They don't have the impetus to thrive because the teachers have no want or desire to be better. They know that if they can continue to just get through their day-to-day life, that the union will keep them from being fired, will keep them from going anywhere, and they'll continue to have a job no matter how good of a teacher they actually are. And of course, there's lots and lots and lots of really good teachers out there, but it only takes a few to spoil the bunch, as we see with everything else. So when we talk about equality of opportunity, it doesn't mean everybody's going to be given the same opportunities to start off with in life. You know, that's guaranteeing outcome. That's not guaranteeing opportunity. If what you're saying is that, oh, everybody has to go to the same school and everybody has to get the same grades and everybody has to have that, that's opportunity. That's equality of outcome, not equality of opportunity. Equality of opportunity is saying when you put yourself to work and you work hard and you persevere and you try to make it, is there something as far as a governmental standby that's keeping you from succeeding? Is there people saying that because of your race, your gender, your age, your sex, your creed, whatever, that's what's preventing you from succeeding? And I think what we'll find in this country is that that's no longer really the case. You can succeed in any way you choose to succeed and living your life any way you choose. But what we can't have is we can't have them continue to put certain groups above others. So when people say, well, you know, charter schools, that gives somebody an unequal opportunity, it's about making sure that everybody is being given the opportunity to succeed in the end and everything else. We're going to have disparity in what people earn. We're going to have disparity in what people can afford for their children. That's not a negative. We want people seeing what that is. That rises, that causes people to say, you know what, I want to go get that. So in going to get that, I'm going to succeed and I'm going to work harder so that I succeed into the future and I'm able to put a better life in front of my children, as I've done for my kids, you know, and I want every adult to be able to reward themselves through that. But when we talk about saying every kid needs to go to the same school, that's not equality of opportunity. That's equality of outcome. That's ensuring that every kid ends up in the same place, not that they all have an equal chance to get going.
So so let me ask you this. If someone, again, a leftist, comes to you and says, well, some companies and some hiring practices discriminate. In fact, I know here in Germany for a fact that many employment agencies, recruiting companies, recruiting agencies, they're basically outsourced discrimination houses. So what employers do, they'll go to them and say, well, we can't discriminate we can't legally discriminate, so we need you to do it for us. We need you to sift through all the candidates and then send us the ones that we like, based on race and sex and gender and these sorts of things. So if somebody came to you with the argument and said, well, okay, that's fine, but it's not just about government. There are companies doing this too, and we need to regulate the companies to make sure we have race-based and gender-based quotas. What would be your response?
So again, what we brought up just a second ago when we talked about, you know, women in engineering, that's what we're starting to see. We're starting to see these quotas come about. And what we're seeing is that we're not meeting these quotas because, again, if you don't have women who want to go into engineering, they're not going to go into engineering, and that's not going to happen. What we have to make sure is that the employers are hiring the best person for the job, regardless of who that person is and who that person where that person comes from. That they're hiring simply the best people that they think will do the job. And any employer who is putting themselves in a position that they'll say, well, I'm not going to choose a woman because she's a woman, that's ignorant on their part. And the company is going to hurt themselves. But that's not for the government to decide how to dictate. Right. Where that can be dictated is in the free market. because these people will no longer be hiring the best people in the market. So their competitors are going to get these people. These competitors are going to get these employees who are going to then make their competitors better. And the free market is going to sort that out. The free market is going to make it to where the people who are smarter, the people who are more innovative, the people who are better off and more suited to that market are going to thrive inside that market. The government, the invisible hand, says less government interference. Let's get the government out of it. Let's let nature take its course, and let's let the people who are more innovative, smarter, and more intelligent, let's let them succeed because they can. Because if we have people who are better at a job, they are going to do better at that job. It doesn't matter who hires them. And any employer who is putting themselves in a position to not hire the best talent in the world, first of all, their stockholders, their individual stockholders should be ramming that down their throat saying, look, we're not getting the best talent. Why are we not getting the best talent? What about our hiring practices is keeping us from getting the best talent? And then they need to be looking at their HR team and saying, why are we not getting the best talent? Regardless of their race, regardless of where they come from, regardless of their gender, we just need the best talent. So again, it's not a government as able to make a quota that makes that work, because we know government quotas don't work. We know when we look at certain educational fonts and they've said, okay, we need so many kids in this school and that school and whatever of this kind and that kind, it doesn't work out. They don't end up making the quota, or they end up overshooting it, or they end up with other factors coming in part. What we need to make sure is that the free market is allowed to dictate who wins and who loses. Yeah. And when the free market is able to do that, it will correct itself, and it will make sure that the winners are the people who should be winning.
So let's apply this to immigration. Do companies have a right to? So I totally agree with you on all that, by the way. I 100% agree. I believe in the. I don't believe. I recognize that an incontrovertible fact about reality is justice, and that a company who has racist or sexist hiring policies will suffer as a result, and they deserve to suffer as a result. But let's apply this logic to immigration. Do companies have a right to bring in an unlimited number of employees from overseas? So employees that they deem are more qualified than, say, the people that they could find in America. So let's extend this logic out to immigration. Where do you stand on that?
So the simple logic there is we want the best people regardless of where they come from. But we also do have to make sure that we're vetting the people who are coming into this country appropriately. And that, what we see is a lot of times we get a lot of people from overseas and they're either not able to assimilate into the culture, or there's other issues that play along into that. So it is important that companies are able to hire people from overseas. I mean, the great thing about Trump's economy, and that the left just doesn't want to admit, is that Trump's economy is doing so great that there's more jobs right now than we have people to take them. So we definitely do need a workforce from abroad. We definitely do need people from abroad to come in and take jobs. But at the same time, we need to make sure that Americans are able to get jobs as well, and that they're not being pushed out of the job market because of an influx of foreign talent. And what we're seeing is what all these companies will do is they'll bring this foreign talent in because they can pay them a significant amount less. Because they're sponsoring for their visa, they know that they don't have to pay them as much money as they would have to pay an American who lives here and is working here. So it is important there to make sure that these companies are hiring people that fit the bill and fit the criteria, and are looking to make sure that the employees they're getting are employees who are the best that they can get, but that they're not simply looking to hire abroad to make sure that they bring in cheaper and lower source talent.
All right, yeah, we're having some internet connectivity issues here, so it was difficult for me to understand some of that. But I understood you to say that we need to make sure that the people that we're bringing into the country are not replacing Americans who could otherwise do the job. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes. I mean, you want to make sure that the people we're bringing into the country are to supplement the jobs that we have that we can't fill. That we're not bringing in people to replace Americans or to bypass hiring Americans. We need to make sure that the people who are coming into the country, and again, what I said is the great thing about Trump's economy is that we currently have a surplus of jobs. We have more job openings than we have people to fill them. So there is a need there for some foreign workforce. But we also have to make sure that we're not supplanting Americans looking for jobs, and that we're not creating a supply rush on jobs, on labor that keeps the cost of labor from rising. And what we see is with the left is we see a lot of people coming into this country, and it creates a supply overage in labor. And that's what keeps wages low, because employers know that they have more people that they could possibly hire to take the jobs than so if person A comes and asks for a raise, they can just say, well, no, I've got somebody else waiting to take this job. I'll just hire them instead. And what we're starting to see in Trump's economy is, as it's starting to turn, as we're starting to push over that hill, is that as the jobs become more readily available here in the country, wages are starting to rise because employers are starting to get scarce on their employees. The labor market is starting to dry up, and they're having to now, the demand is exceeding the supply. And so what that does is that drives the price up, and wages are starting to rise because of that, because Trump's economy has put us in a position where we're creating jobs at a faster pace. What we also have to be very careful of here is to make sure that we don't have employers who are looking to offshore jobs, just to offshore jobs to other countries, that there is a penalty for taking business outside of the country and for moving these factories, moving these plants to other countries and hiring workforce outside of us, just because you can go to China and you can hire people at super cheap costs. And what Trump has been able to do is he's been able to start getting these companies to come back into the country by lowering the corporate tax rate, getting us back onto a much more even playing field with the rest of the world on our corporate taxation rates. And then also by offering other incentives. And then, of course, on the side of China, starting to levy a little bit of tariff on them that doesn't make it so easy to go over there, where we know that they're not operating on a fair playing field. We know that the Chinese are paying their people very little wages, that they're polluting at a crazy level. They're the number one polluter in carbon emissions by far. They just dump plastic into the ocean. And they're cutting corners at every place possible to get prices down. And we need to make sure that our employers are not just offboarding their talent over there, and keeping the jobs here in this country and hiring people here that can do that work.
So a couple of questions on that. So you mentioned the desire for rising wages. Why not just get on board with the $15 minimum wage? Why go through all the gymnastics of immigration policy and all of this and not just raise the minimum wage?
Because we've seen that every time minimum wage, and again, it goes back to the invisible hand of the market. Anytime government inputs a cap or a ceiling on the market, what ends up happening is a lot of dead weight loss of the market. And we can look at Seattle as a great example of this. Seattle implemented a $15 minimum wage, and McDonald's just started putting little kiosks that you order from in their restaurants. They fired half the people that worked there. Now these people are unemployed. And yes, the very few people who still have jobs, they are benefiting from a $15 an hour minimum wage, but the vast majority of people who would have taken those jobs are not. And what we have to make sure is that the government is staying as much out of the market as humanly possible. We need the government to remove themselves from the market and allow the market to dictate itself. So wages rise organically when there's a labor shortage, when there's less workers than there are jobs available, when the market is moving. And what we've seen is that the market moves at a better rate when the government deregulates. When the government takes more regulations off the market and allows the market to dictate itself, the markets pick up. Our economy churns at a much higher rate. President Obama said we would need a magic wand to hit 3% GDP growth again. Well, somebody tell me where Trump got that fairy wand at, because he sure as hell did it. He's been able to sustain a very good GDP growth year over year after quarter. And when we look at the economics of it, it's very simple. When you look at the unemployment rates over the last 40 years, when you look at GDP growth over the last 40 years, anytime we can point to an era of government deregulation, we can point to an era of economic growth. And because when the economy grows, all ships float in a rising tide. When the economy grows, then we see wages rise. Then we see other things. But when we see more government regulation, when we see them arbitrarily inflate the cost of labor, what happens is that the supply of labor stays stagnant, but the demand for labor will then go down, which means we're going to have a crest fall and a deadweight loss in the labor market. We're going to have more people pushed out of the labor market and less people entering the labor market, and that's going to leave wages stagnant. What we've seen since the last time that we've had a minimum wage hike is that wages stagnated, because now all of a sudden employers who would have been employing people at the bottom end, which typically would have been high school kids or young adults entering the job market, getting these very cheap jobs. Now they're not hiring those people anymore. They're hiring more seasoned people and paying them that minimum wage because it's that higher level. And we need to make sure that we're allowing the employer market, the labor market, to sort itself out naturally. We can't pick winners and losers in a market. And we need to make sure that companies are able to hire people and able to put them to work and let these people grow inside of that industry. So I know I started out in the oil and gas industry. When I started out, before I joined the National Guard, I was a crane rigger. I made $8.50 an hour. And it sucked. I'll be real honest. I worked a lot. I worked really hard. And I would get my paycheck and I'd look at it and go, dang, I can barely afford to pay for fuel. But at the same time, I had a job. I was learning. I was able to gain experience. And then I was able to make better determinations on where I wanted to move in the future. And what we're seeing is the labor market of teenagers and young adults is they're not getting these starter jobs. They're not getting these jobs at McDonald's or at a grocery store, and they're not getting that work ethic built into them. They're not seeing what it's like. And so what happens is they go to college because they're told, if you go to college, you'll get a job, right? That's what you need to do. You need to go to college. That's how you get a job. And then they get out of college, and for some reason, they've got it wrapped around their head that they're going to get a $100,000 a year job the moment they graduate from college. And they get out of college, and somebody says, I'll give you $40,000 to come work for me and do blah, blah, blah. And they say, oh, well, this isn't worth it. And so what they've started to do now is they've started to blame the older generation. Oh, it's not that we suck as a generation and we have no work ethic and no drive and that we want $100,000 to do a nothing job. It's because these older people in these companies, they hold these jobs. They're keeping these jobs. They're keeping me from getting that job. They're just selfish and they're keeping me from being able to get that job. What it really is that these companies are looking at experience and they're looking at education and they're looking at a bunch of different factors, and they see, okay, you went to college and you got an education, but you have no work experience. You've never had a job before. You've never been in the market before. You've never seen what it's like to show up at 8 a.m. time after time after time again and stay till 5 p.m. and put in a day's work. And we aren't going to value you as high as somebody that we know has been in the market for a while and has been working for a while. And that pushes their labor market down. And what we have to do is we have to get back to allowing people to go to work. And for me, economically, it means pulling back on the minimum wage argument. And I've actually called for a tiered minimum wage. We know, I would love to get rid of the minimum wage together, but we both know that Democrats aren't going to let us do that. So let's go ahead and start working on something.
It has to be a step-by-step process, yeah.
Let's work on something that we think we might be able to get through. So what I would call for is a I think I set the number at $4.35 an hour for 16 to 18-year-olds. Then step back to $5.25 an hour, the old minimum wage for 18 to 25-year-olds, and then above 25 going back to $7.25 or $7.50, what it is now. And what this will do is it'll give employers an impetus to hire these younger people and give them that first job because they can get that labor cheaper and they can hire somebody who's hungry and trying to learn. And it makes value for them in teaching these and training these people. Because I know that when I took my second oil field job, I had a guy that basically took a shot on me. I didn't know anything about the industry or what, his line of operating was. And he hired me and paid me a little bit less. But what he gave me in training, what he gave me in knowledge of the industry was more valuable than the money he could have given me because it allowed me to then go get that next job. And it trained me to be able to do that next job. And we need to make sure that we're giving employers reasons to hire these young kids and to hire these young adults and bring them into the market and train them. But you have to give them incentives to do that, which is allowing them to pay those people just a little bit less.
Yeah, the most basic understanding of minimum wage can simply be stated as all jobs worth less than X dollars per hour are now illegal. That's it. And
Yes.
those jobs that you eradicate out of existence, that minimum wage eradicates out of existence, are the very jobs that inner city urban youth, the least educated, the most impoverished, it's those jobs that they need to, as you say, have their own come up. It is those jobs where you establish your most basic skills. You know, a shopkeeper would be happy to pay somebody $2 or $3 an hour to sweep the shop once an hour so they don't have to, you know,
Exactly.
and it's those basic skills, like you mentioned, showing up on time, staying until 5, you know, being put together, looking presentable, that person goes, hey man, so-and-so just put in their 2 weeks notice. Do you want to go from sweeping the floor and working the cash register? It'll be this amount of raise. Well, heck yeah. You know, and it's this stepping stone process that they not only build skills, but far more important than that, they actually build self-esteem. I think that's something that is lacking among our youth and among especially inner city urban youth is a sense of identity in terms of self-esteem and who they are and what they're worth and what they're capable of. And something like minimum wage, especially a $15 an hour minimum wage, you are just cutting their legs out from under them, and finding that becomes a non-starter. Would you agree with that?
I perfectly agree. And it's funny that we see the Democrat debates, and they're talking about automation. I'm sorry. We see them talking about automation and the threat it is to the labor market. And we see them, oh, well, you know, what are we going to do about this? But what their policies are pushing companies further and further to automation, because as they continue to increase the cost of labor, these companies now have more incentive to go and automate their processes.
Absolutely.
And go and get machinery and make it to where they have less people in their factory, because machines will work all day and all night for the same amount of money, and they're never going to strike, and they're never going to complain, and they're never going to go out and look for a bigger money, or never going to lobby the government to get them a higher wage. So all these employers are doing is it's incentivizing them, as we saw with McDonald's in Seattle. You know, I don't know if you've been to if they have it in Germany now, but here in the U.S.
they do. Oh yeah, no, this hit Europe long before the United States. We are way farther down here in Europe, down the rabbit hole in terms of automation.
So what had happened was, you know, exactly what happened was, as soon as they said, okay, $15 an hour minimum wage, McDonald's responded by saying, okay, we'll fire half our employees then. If you're going to double the cost of labor, we'll fire half the employees so that we're still paying the same amount in labor. And now we're going to automate all of these other features so that we don't have to pay people to do this. And so now what we've done is we've not helped anybody. We've taken people out of the labor market. We've taken their ability to learn and grow and train and get other benefits out of the market. And now we've replaced them. And so it's nice. Go ahead.
But wouldn't you agree, though, that this needs to not be framed in the sense that McDonald's responded by firing half the people? It should be well understood that those jobs they just became illegal. Because McDonald's, you know, if McDonald's decides a job is worth $7.50 an hour, and now they have to pay that person $15 an hour, they're not going to lose $6.50 an hour on that person.
So what I think we need to do is
$7.50 an hour, rather. They're not going to lose that money. They're just going to. It's just that job is not legal to exist anymore. It's not really a response. It's just more of a business obligation. They've been obligated to do that by minimum wage. So it's not even McDonald's making a choice. They've been obligated to that. And I'll say very quickly also that in this conversation of automation, what the left does, and Andrew Yang and all these others, what they're doing is divorcing cause and effect. They are, you know, in philosophy, the is-ought gap. They are divorcing is and ought. You know, they're divorcing cause and effect. So they're talking about the effect, which is automation, without talking about the cause. The cause, as you've mentioned, well, there's many causes, but one of them is minimum wage. It's also the regulatory environment. So regulations, environmental regulations, labor regulations, minimum wage, all of this overhead, all of that. That is all the cause. And the solution is automation to all of that, because, you're not going to get, you don't need to worry about a sexual harassment lawsuit when it's a machine doing the work. So it's a bigger conversation than just minimum wage. There's many causes to this automation, but fundamentally what the left is trying to do is divorce cause from effect. They're just trying to talk about the effect. And they're actually, it's a total and complete tacit, implicit buy-in that all of this stuff is going to continue. Yeah, minimum wage is going to continue going up. This is all going to continue. That's why we need to worry about automation, they say. This is why, Andrea, it's happening. It's here. We need to think about this. So they're tacitly admitting that they don't want to address the cause of any of this, which is the regulatory state and including minimum wage.
So for me, I want to frame this as this is a free market transaction between the employee and the employer. Your wages are a free market transaction. There is nobody in this country who is forcing you to work for any given employer. I have an employer, you have an employer. We are not forced. We are not bound to work for that employer. You can leave at any moment in time, especially in Texas, which is a right to work state, which gives a tremendous amount of power to the employee to say, you know what, I don't like it here. And I'm just going to leave. I'm going to walk my butt down the road and I'm going to go find another job. And I think they'll pay me more or whatever I want to do. And by doing that, by making it a free market transaction between the employer and the employee and taking the government out of that transaction, it's going to allow people to make better decisions for themselves. Maybe that means that 16, 18, 20-year-old is able to get that job and is able to start building that reputation up as being a hardworking person and being able to put, a resume together of saying, look, I show up for work, I do my job, I do what I'm asked to do. Or maybe it's that midlife, that mid-career person who's saying, you know what, I'm going to start my own company, or I'm going to go out and I'm going to do my own thing and go to a different company. And having that free market transaction amongst those two individuals and allows for more freedom and allows for more growth inside of that. We can, when you study economics at any level, economics is going to tell you that the invisible hand is always the best course of action, that the invisible hand is better able to dictate than any government entity or any person that's putting it in, and that human nature is going to take its course and it's going to play out. And what we have to start allowing is we have to allow these to be free market transactions and stop dictating how these transactions occur with a government regulation.
Just for anybody listening right now who's not familiar with Wealth of Nations, can you explain quickly what the the invisible hand is?
So the invisible hand is simply, in economics, we talk about the fact that any rational person will work. Hold on, my computer's cutting out real quick. Let me get back to it. Okay, we still there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. So in economics, we talk about the fact that the first principle of economics is that any rational person in an economic system is going to work within their own best self-interest. What that means is people are selfish. We know people are selfish. And when we take the entirety of the market, when we take the entirety of all of these transactions working with each other and everybody working in their own best self-interest, what that means is that there's this invisible hand on the market that's guiding the market. View it as a puppet master up in the booth, who's pulling the strings. But what it actually is, it's the entirety of all of these human interactions that are all being made at the betterment of each individual person that are guiding the market and how it's going to go and who's going to win and who's going to lose within the market. So when we say the invisible hand of the market, what we're talking about is we're talking about people, our ability to adjust the market to what we believe and what we like and what we don't like. And we see that with trends and with other things, that the market is continually evolving and moving and changing in how it works. And those interactions, those one-on-one interactions, building up over a large plethora of interactions, is better able to dictate where the market should go and how the market should react than any government entity or any person, any individual who thinks they have enough knowledge to be able to choose these interactions. And it allows the market to be able to play out in a natural way that allows people to pick and choose winners based off of their buying habits, based off of their preferences and other things, instead of the government saying, okay, we like this company or we like this group for X and we're going to let them win.
All right. Great explanation. um, we should move on because we've now we're on the second question of about 12 that I've written down. So
I will talk forever. So be warned.
no worries, man. We got time here. So okay, what is your primary goal if you'd be elected?
My primary goal is to start making government work for people who work. And I know it sounds a little slogany and it was kind of designed to be, but what it really means is that people who go to work every day, who put their boots on or put their shoes on and go to work and do the best they can for their family, those are the people I want our government to benefit. Those are the people I want our government to support. And, you know, we're never going to get out of having some welfare state people and people in that nation. But at the same time, I want to make sure that the people who are going to work every day and are putting their time in are the people who are benefiting the most from this country and from the laws we have in place. And what that is saying is that these are the people who make up this country. They're the innovators, they're the inventors, they're the workers, they're the people who make our country move and shake. People, who are not in the industries or not in the market, they're not pushing this country forward at all. They're not creating the next iPhone. They're not creating the next laptop. They're not making software or anything else. They're not inputting anything into the market. So we need to make sure that the people who are actually going to work every day, that the laws benefit them, and making sure that they're able to better take what they've made and benefit from it. And what that means is we need to start rolling back the government's interaction in our daily lives. We need to start rolling back the government's interaction in our paychecks. And we need to make sure that the government is only working to be efficient to protect us, to have that national government, to conduct foreign diplomacy and trade agreements and things of those natures. They shouldn't be involved in our day-to-day transactions, and they shouldn't be involved in where I'm deciding to work or how I'm deciding to work.
All right. Well, I don't even have any questions. I like that.
Well, good. So you've probably seen that one of the big policies I'm pushing for, one of the first things I came out of the gate with, is that I want to get rid of income tax on overtime hours. And
that was going to be my next question.
So what I feel here, and I don't make overtime anymore, but I used to, is that when you work overtime, you're taking more time away from your family, more time away from your friends, more time away from doing the things you want to do. And yet we disenfranchise those people by taxing them at a higher level on that income. And by saying, well, no, you're going to be punished for working that extra bit. And a lot of our taxation code in this country is designed to either incentivize somebody to do something or punish somebody for doing something else. So we see it with tobacco products and alcohol. There's a larger tax on these things because we want to incentivize you not to do it. We want to, give you a little impetus to not to do it. And then we take tax away on things that we want you to do. So what are we saying to people who work overtime when we tax them harder on those hours? Is we're saying, we don't want you to do it. We don't want you to put that extra time in. We don't want you to make that extra money. We don't want you to do these things. And that's the wrong message we're sending to these people. We have hardworking people that come from every race, religion, gender. I don't care. Everybody work. A lot of people work overtime. And this would allow them to put more of that money in their pocket and be able to make better decisions on where to spend their money and be able to make better decisions on where their money needs to go. And these are also, when we're talking people who are working overtime, we're not talking top of the economic food chain here. We're talking people at the middle to low end of the economic spectrum. These are people who could most impacted by that money today and would be able to make betterment in their lives. They'd either be able to start putting money in savings, they'd be able to pay off some debt, they'd be able to do some other things with that money, and that would benefit them today, and not letting the money go to the government and then hope it washes back down into society, because we all know that the government is just a black hole, black pit for money. They just spend money, spend money, spend money. It never comes back to us. We need to keep that money in our people's hands and allow them to make better decisions. And that's going back to that invisible hand. When the people are able to make decisions, the market functions correctly and it works beautifully.
So yeah, you're entirely correct. I mean, a CEO is on salary, for example. He's not getting taxed on overtime because he's already working overtime and he's being paid a salary for it. The people who get paid overtime hours are precisely the people that you described, which are hourly workers, which are generally blue collar workers. And so in that sense, it's very much a regressive income tax.
Yeah, it's exactly punishing the people that the Democrats say they don't want to punish. Every time we see a tax cut in this country, what's the Democrats' first argument against it, right? Well, that's a tax cut for the rich. That's a tax cut for the wealthy. And we saw that with the Trump tax cuts because they can frame it that way. And because the normal person isn't doing the math to actually figure out what their tax base is, they just kind of tend to believe, oh, well, yeah, that's probably right. But what we see is that those tax cuts did impact the lower end of the economic spectrum quite well. I saw a 7% decrease in my tax rate, but other people didn't see. But the other part of that was we also had a welfare tax increase at the same time, so it kind of offset for a lot of people. And then people who live in states that have heavy income tax in those states, now they're not able to write off those state income taxes, so to them, it looked worse, but they really need to be blaming their states and not the federal government because it's their state income tax is what's killing them, not the federal income tax is what's killing them. And what we're seeing, though, is that if we were able to take a tax cut like this that is designed and aimed specifically at the bottom or middle segments of the economy, we would wash out that Democrat, that leftist mantra of, oh, it's for the rich, it's for the rich, it's for the rich. Because now we can say this tax cut is specifically designed to impact those people who need the money the most and give them the impetus to go work hard. So you're still going to get taxed on your first 40 hours. But if you work any hours over 40, now all of a sudden that becomes income tax free. That's money that you get to put in your pocket and use however you want to use it. And that incentivizes hard work instead of de-incentivizing it.
And how specifically in your district is this something? Is this a position you chose because there is an attribute about your district which is unique?
So my district, which encompasses most of the Permian Basin. So there's a lot of cattle industry. There's a lot of oil and gas industry. So there are a lot of hourly workers. There's a lot of people who are out there trying to make a living and trying to benefit their family. And there are people coming from all over the countries into the Permian Basin, all over the world really, coming into the Permian Basin trying to make money. And what we see is these people are working hard, and yet they're being punished in taxation. So yes, there is some specifics to my district where we see that there's a lot of hourly workers. We see that there's a big gambit of people working a lot of overtime because oil and gas industry tends to have a lot of overtime. But it's not specific. Overtime, of course, is not specific to the 11th District of Texas. There's people all over the country that are working overtime. So I chose this because I believe it's the right thing to do, because I believe that when you work hard, you should be rewarded for it. And when people go out and they put their time in, they put their effort in to make something better or to make a company better or to work harder to make this extra money, that's when they should be rewarded. They shouldn't be punished for doing something like that. And so it's important that we make sure that the people that are on this end of the economic spectrum are getting as much opportunity to be rewarded by their work as their employers are. Because what we see with a lot of the Democratic policies of wanting to make things more expensive and things, these actually benefit larger corporations. These benefit people who have the ability to offshore money or to write off huge losses that are not real losses, and things like this, and are able to play the taxation game. They're much more able to absorb these additional costs. So we see Amazon. Amazon's not complaining about a $15 hour minimum wage. The reason, though, is because they know that they are the only ones who can compete in that market at $15 an hour. They know they're the only company who can afford it, and it's going to drive all their competitors out of business because their competitors won't be able to afford to pay people that amount of money. And what we need to do is make sure that not only are we benefiting the employer by making sure that they're able to hire people and pay reasonable wages and not that, but also that once the employee starts to put in that time and that effort, that they're able to be rewarded for their hard work by being able to put that money in their pocket and being able to take that money and spend it where they need to.
Right on. Well, I just got a message from my co-host on Hardly Strictly Politics and asked if we were still chatting. Would you be interested in jumping onto our Discord server and maybe we could conclude this segment? I don't know how you're doing on time. We're coming up on an hour right now.
I've
If you
got all
want,
the time in the world for you, buddy.
all right, dude. Let's do this. I've got one more question, and then let's conclude. This will be part one. Then we'll jump onto our Discord server. We'll have a chat with just the three of us. It'll be more casual. I've still got a few questions, but I think that these questions are less policy related, less nitty gritty politics, and more just kind of generally where you fit in among the ranks of the people that are running against you, and some other more general questions. So I think that might be. Three people, it might be a little more interesting, actually. So, last question: Why should people vote for you?
People should vote for me because the work ethic. It's about going to Washington and not only understanding the economics of the situation and the constitutional amendments and things of this nature, but having a work ethic. We see a lot of people get to Washington and then all of a sudden their work ethic starts to wane. It starts to become a lot less. And then they're not really out trying to actually do anything, and one of the things I've pointed to is immigration reform. 1986, Ronald Reagan passed the first immigration asylum laws. And ever since then, we've been promised we will get immigration reform done every 2 years. We will get it done. We will get it done. We will get it done. And nothing has happened. And to be fair, I wasn't born in 1986. I wasn't alive when that happened. So my entire life has been spent being told that we're going to get this done. And nothing has been done. No laws have been passed. Nothing has been made better. And we need people that are going to go to Washington that are actually going to instill a work ethic there and that are going to work hard and try to find solutions. I iterated it a little bit earlier. There's things that I personally believe in, like a flat tax or like abolishing the minimum wage completely. But I understand that we're not just going to be able to go in there and do whatever we want. We have to work with the other side. We have to negotiate, and we have to find some policies where we can start to move the goalpost, and we can start to make things a little bit better and a little bit better piece by piece. And as we start to do that, as we start to roll back some of these regulations, as we start to make a little bit of headway, we can then start pointing to the data. We can get the data on our side showing that it continually gets better. The economy gets better when we deregulate, and we can start pointing to these things and start getting the American people to buy into that. And I want to go to Washington and I want to work my butt off. I don't want to take vacation. I don't want to take days off. I don't want to go there and play golf. I don't play golf. I'm horrible at golf. You can ask my brother. I'm about the world's worst golf player. I want to go to Washington and I want to work my butt off, and I want to continually be writing pieces of legislation. I want to continually be trying to get bills through the House, and I want to continually be trying to make life better in any way I can. And that means I'm going to have to work with some Democrats. I'm going to have to go forth and put forward some policies that maybe it's not exactly what I believe in, but I think it's going to get us closer to where we need to go.
All right. Well, finally, before we conclude part one, mention it again, please, sir. Where can people find you on social media?
So we have Facebook, Ross Schumann for U.S. Congress. We have Twitter, at Ross Schumann. It's ROSSSCHUMANN. We also have our website, SchumannTX11.com. That's SchumannTX11.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Ross. We're going to put this up on all of our channels, hopefully give you a little bit of exposure and get your ideas out there. We're going to jump over into a more casual conversation for part two of this interview. And thank you again. It was a pleasure. Hopefully we can do this more. Hopefully we can do it in a video format. I apologize for anybody listening to this. We wanted to do this in a video format, but I am apparently a boomer and couldn't figure it out, so I've got to work on that, and maybe I can do this again in the next week or two. So thank you so much for joining us, Ross, and we'll be in part two here momentarily.
Thank you.